Hi, my name is Caitlin, I read a lot, and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be doing a video completely inspired by Jesse the Reader's series on his channel called Books I've Read Recently / Books I've Read Not So Recently, except today I will be talking about the books that I have currently read in quarantine. We're going to start with March and then work our way from there. So, as I mentioned, I read 16 books. I'll be talking about 8. So, let's begin. I've actually been having an okay reading year. My overall Goodreads goal was to read 52 books. I'm 2 books behind schedule though because I had a bit of a reading slump towards the beginning of the year, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So, the first book that I read in March, so that was kind of the beginning of the pandemic, was A Curse So Dark and I'm looking down because I have a list of all the books that I read. The first book is A Curse So Dark and Lonely. That is a picture of the book. I don't have it physically because I borrowed it from the library, but I do have the second book. So this is the second book, A Heart So Fierce Unbroken by Bridget Kemmerer. And from what I remember of the story, obviously this was like all the way in March, but it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I really enjoyed this book. Basically, this girl, Harper, has been taken by a soldier from... where is this world? What is this world called? I forgot the name of the world. I'm sorry. But it's taken by Gray, who is a soldier from the kingdom where the beast is from, and his name is Ren. And obviously, as you know, the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale is that he must get a girl to fall in love with him so that his curse is lifted. And that's like the main premise of the story, like at its core, that's really what it is. But what I found really interesting about this book was that it didn't feel like a retelling. Like I could kind of see where the retelling was coming into play, but it was on its own, it was its own story, and I really loved it for that. But what I really appreciated the most was the characters, because it's a very small cast of characters. In fact, I think there's only like really 3 main characters that we see, and then just like a ton of other minor side characters that really aren't that important, in my opinion. We really get to know our main character, Harper, and our love interest / beast, Ren, as well as Gray, who's actually my favorite character. He's like a side character, but he's a very important side character. And I know that the next book follows, like this book, it follows Gray a lot more because of the way that the book ended. And yeah, so I gave that book a 4.5 out of 5, and it's actually one of my favorites of this year so far. The next book after that was Yes, No, Maybe So by Becky Albertalli and Aisha Saeed. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 at 3.5. I was kind of iffy on what I wanted to rank it, but I think on Goodreads it's officially 4 out of 5. By the way, if you ever want to see my reviews, I will leave a link to my Goodreads down below. This is another book that I don't have physically because I just borrowed it from the library, but Becky Albertalli is one of my all-time favorite authors. I absolutely love her contemporaries, and I have almost every single one of her books on my shelf. As for Yes, No, Maybe So, I did enjoy the book. It's a contemporary, by the way. It's a political contemporary about Jamie and Maya. And Maya is a Muslim who is currently going through the worst Ramadan ever. Her parents are separating / getting a divorce, and she's starting to lose touch with her best friend, who's preparing to go off to college, whereas Jamie is stuck doing canvassing for a political election that's happening. And I enjoyed the book for its contemporary sense. Like, it was a very cute and fluffy book, which is, you know, what I expect from Becky Albertalli. I haven't read any of Aisha Saeed's books, unfortunately, but I knew that if Becky was going to be writing or a part of the story, I knew it was going to be really fluffy. It hit all those points for me, but I felt like this book, for what the message it was trying to portray as like trying to get teens more involved in politics and being more self-aware of their impact and their influence that they could potentially have on certain things like elections and political power, etc. I just think that maybe it didn't need the romance. I think that if Jamie and Maya could have just been like friends, or like they both like used each other to help come out of their shells, I think it would have been just as effective. They didn't need to like become a couple or any of that. I wouldn't read it again necessarily, but I do think that some other people who rewind. This book has a lot of representation. I know that Jamie is a Jew, sorry. I know that Maya was Muslim, and I know that it's an Own Voices novel. So I think for people who don't necessarily always feel like they are represented in YA books, I think that this book really could be something for them. It wasn't it for me, obviously, because I am not either of those things, but I do know that I know some people who may not see themselves in other forms of media in a positive light. I do think that this could be that book for them. Next book I read, oh my goodness, another one of my absolute favorite books. I wanted to do a book review on this book, but book reviews are just so tedious in filming and note-taking and editing, so I don't know. But if you would like me to do a book review, then by all means comment down below. And that book is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. It is her newest release of this year. I actually have this one physically, so behold it in all its glory. Cordelia Carstairs on the front cover. She's gorgeous, and this is a mammoth of a book. Chain of Gold is a continuation of the Shadowhunter Chronicles. If you're not aware of what the Shadowhunter Chronicles are, it is a huge ass series created by Cassandra Clare. Chain of Gold is the sequel to the Infernal Devices series. I prefer to read books in publication order because that's how the author intended to be read, so I read them as they came out. But in order to read this book, however, you don't need to have read any of the other books, like, just so you know. But I do recommend that you read at least the Infernal Devices, which is Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess. Chain of Gold is basically at its core, it's about fighting demons. If you know like literally nothing about the Shadow World, basically in this world, there are these people like demon hunters called shadow hunters, and these shadow hunters are blessed with angel blood, and that basically means that they have the ability to draw angelic runes on themselves, and that gives them enhanced powers to then fight demons, and they can also wield weapons of angel fire. And in this story we follow Cordelia Carstairs, who is a shadow hunter, and she basically is traveling to London, and she's reuniting with some of her childhood friends. But while they're there, a sickness is taking over London, and London is quarantined, which pretty ironic, you know, considering the current circumstances. So Cassandra Clare, maybe you're an oracle. It was one of those books where it was so heavily character driven that like the plot was kind of like second, third thing that was on my mind as I was reading it, because I cared so much about these characters. And I think that with Cassandra Clare, she does it so well, because her characters, like, you just can't help but love them. And these cast of characters, it's a lot bigger than our usual cast compared to her other books, but I loved every single one of them, and I have a lot of love for the Merry Thieves, as they call them. The reason why I think I enjoyed Chain of Gold so much was because it really came back to the core of what being a shadow hunter is, and that's fighting demons. It's very action-packed. It has a lot of, like, the magic system of the Shadow World is so interesting. I really love the background that it goes into for all the other characters, and we also see some of our favorite characters from the Infernal Devices, so that's why I recommend that you read the Infernal Devices first, because if you read this, then you will get spoiled, because this is based off of the children of the first series, if that makes sense. I gave this one obviously a 5 out of 5. The next book is a reread. I was actually meant to reread this prior to Chain of Gold to kind of refresh my mind on it, but I got too excited to read Chain of Gold, so I ended up rereading it afterwards. And that was Clockwork Prince and Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare, which is the second and third books in the Infernal Devices. I won't go too much into detail about these, but it basically, the first book follows Tessa Gray, who has just come into London seeking her brother, who she had been separated from because like he went off to go on business and whatever, but then she gets introduced to the Shadow World. I gave these, I mean, I've read them already. This is like my second or third time reading them, especially Clockwork Princess. It's my favorite book of Infernal Devices series, and it's actually signed by Cassandra Clare herself. The next book is, let's see, Crescent City by, actually no, that's a lie. It's called House of Earth and Blood, and then the actual series is called Crescent City, but I keep calling it Crescent City. This is her, Sarah J. Maas's newest book. It's actually a new adult book rather than a YA. But you know, knowing Sarah J. Maas, like, majority of her books are practically adult / new adult, so I mean, it's not that different from the other books that she's written, but I actually enjoyed this book a whole lot more than I enjoyed like Throne of Glass. A Court of Thorns and Roses is a series that I do enjoy, but I think I like the cast of characters from this story more. But I will say, like, that it's like a really big book, and at least like 100 or 200 pages of it is just like heavy world building and info dumping, and I definitely had to kind of go back on some of the chapters and reread them before I continued, because I was just feeling a little bit overwhelmed at how much information I was receiving in such a short amount of like pages. And you know, I know it's like it's the first book of a new series, so she really does have to establish that, but I just felt like it could have been executed in a way that wasn't so like heavy. But towards the end and where all the action is starting to pick up, I really enjoyed it. Sarah J. Maas is really great at writing action, I personally think. I know a lot of people give her crap for literally everything, and I do see where they're coming from, but I still enjoy the action part of her stories. I don't think that this story is as bad as her past. Like, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any, but I'm sure that there is, like, every book is gonna have its own criticisms and stuff, but I do think that her writing has gotten a lot better in this book especially. Her characters I really liked. I really liked her main character for this book. She was slightly annoying, but I mean, you'll take what you can get. As for her love interest, I really liked him. He was probably my favorite out of the main love interests I've seen over Sarah J. Maas's books. I did really enjoy this. The ending was definitely not expected, but I did feel like it ended on such a good note that it didn't really need more. Dare I say it? I know it like kind of left on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but it did feel like a complete book. Like, I felt like all the characters reached their kind of like character arcs. I do see the potential for more. Like, I do see it, but like I just don't know if it really needs it to be. The next book is Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian. Unfortunately, I did not enjoy this book that much. I only gave it like a 2.5 or like a 3 out of 5, kind of. I have some notes on it actually, and I think the reason why I just really didn't enjoy this book was because it felt like it had been something I'd read before. A teenage princess whose family has been killed in front of her. Her throne has been taken over by a tyrant and she's vengeful. Love triangle and so much guilt. How many stories come to mind? I'm guessing a lot. This book does touch on almost every single classic trope there is for a fantasy story, so it is quite cliche. I feel like when I say it like that, I'm a bit mean, but I felt like I kind of had to force myself through this. I did enjoy aspects of the book. I did enjoy like a lot of the political aspects to it, which was cool. And I think my favorite part of the book, was the actual magic system and how magic is created. Their magic actually comes from like gems, and they're kind of like elemental powers, so you can control like the earth, and then you have like water gems that help make you look youthful and other things like that. And it's really, really interesting, like the actual world, but I just felt like the writing really lacked, and I didn't create any like personal connection with any of the characters, which, because I love character driven like stories so much, it really lacked in that for me. Okay, last book that I would like to talk about today is another book that I borrowed from the library, was The Universe of Us by Leav. Oh my goodness, I love this book. It is a poetry collection, and it's basically full of like love poems, and oh my goodness, I can't explain it because I really like poetry. Is one of those things, I know not everyone loves poetry, but I personally do, and it was my first time reading Leav's writing, and it's gorgeous. It's so beautiful and it's incredibly moving, and I made a list of some of my favorites, and I'll like insert like screenshots here of some of my favorite ones, and just like I was just so incredibly moved by some of them, and it really just made me want to fall in love basically. And I think that's just, it's such a nice feeling reading poetry that you can really feel deep in your soul. And that's why I gave that book a 4 out of 5. I would definitely read it again, and I would highly recommend it to people who are a little bit of a romantic. But that is all the books that I read in quarantine for the first 3 months of quarantine. I will film another video about the rest of the books that I read. So I hope you guys enjoyed this book. Comment down below what books that you have been reading or that you have read these past couple months. And yeah, I hope you guys are staying safe, staying inside, wearing masks. Very important. It's not that hard. Just do it. It is afternoon for me, so I hope you guys have a good afternoon. Otherwise, whatever time you guys are watching this, have a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, a good night, and goodbye. And like, comment, subscribe, and click the post notification if you would like. Okay, goodbye.